You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode number 83. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I am so excited to have you join me here this week. When this episode goes live, it will be Wednesday, December 21st, 2022. If you're like me and you celebrate Christmas and you have young children running around your house, you will very likely be, like me, scrambling to get everything ready for the big day. I wish I could say that I was one of those people that organizes herself well before Christmas, but I am one of those people that you see scrambling in the drugstore on Christmas Eve, trying to find stocking stuffers to put in the stockings. And so I predict that by this time next week, on Wednesday, December 21st, I will be trying to figure out what to put in the stockings. I will probably be trying to figure out how to keep my kids entertained over the break. And I'll be fitting in some work stuff here and there and just kind of winging it. That's kind of how I roll. So I share this with you because for some of you, you may look down on me. You're entitled to that. Welcome. Because you're probably all organized and your gifts are wrapped and everything's ready and it's really just a matter of execution. But for others, you may be in a similar boat. Your Christmas may be totally disorganized. Maybe you don't celebrate Christmas, you celebrate Hanukkah, or you have another way of celebrating with your family this time of year, and you're just like me. And so let this be permission for all of you that you don't have to do it perfectly. You do not. So what I really want to talk about today is New Year's, which is 10 days from the day this podcast episode goes live. So we've got a bit of lead time to talk about resolutions, and I have some thoughts I'd like to share about resolutions, and we will do that. But before I dive into that, the substance of today's conversation, I did want to share with you that I do have a program that is opening January 2023. It is a 6-month group coaching and mastermind experience. It will be open for 8 women lawyers. The webpage that discusses it, all the details, is live. I will link to it in the notes to this episode. If you are on LinkedIn and we're connected there, or if you follow me there, I'll be posting about it. I have posted recently about a webinar I'm doing on Wednesday. You may be registered for that already. If not, you may still have an opportunity to sign up for that. It's at noon Pacific time. We'll link to that as well in the notes to this episode. And the reason that I'm putting together this program in the new year is that I'm creating a container. I want to foster community among a group of women lawyers who are all working toward a goal, something that is important to them in their practice. The goal could be anything from wanting to make a transition in your job, whether it's a transition within your existing job from one position to perhaps another position. Maybe you're looking to transition out of the organization you're in. Maybe you're looking to up-level your practice. Maybe you have some practice management challenges and you want to streamline your processes. Maybe you want to have more peace around your practice. Maybe you're working on confidence building. Really, there are a lot of goals that you might be working on. And the idea is to create a container where we can foster your growth. I'm going to teach you a number of concepts about how to set goals, how to conceive of yourself, talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about how you can create sustainable growth in your practice. So there are a number of topics that I will be teaching you on and also coaching you on in community with a group of other like-minded, high-achieving women lawyers. So if this is something that sounds like it would be of interest to you, then please reach out to me with any questions that you have. You can register directly on the webpage. You don't need to talk to me. You're welcome to, but you'll see all the details there. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. So with that, I am going to dive into today's topic, which is all about New Year's resolutions and some of the traps that I think we can fall into when it comes to setting big goals this time of year. Now, I typically set New Year's resolutions, so I certainly don't have objections to resolving to make changes in the new year. But what I do have objections to is when you set goals that set you up for failure, and instead of achieving the goals that you set for yourself, you end up giving up on them really soon and then blaming yourself for that. And I have had experience with really amazing goals where I have achieved them, and I've had experiences where I've set goals and I have not achieved them. If I look at 2022, I have a mix. I have a mix of both. I have goals that I set that I achieved and I feel great about it. I also have goals that I set that I didn't achieve. And do I feel great about it? No, but I also realize that there's learning there for me. And so what I would invite you to think about today as we go through today's episode is to think about the goals that you have in your practice. I would invite you to think about what goals you are tempted to set for yourself as New Year's resolutions. I would invite you to think about what kind of goals you may be resolving to create year after year. Is there one that keeps coming back? One of the classic examples, of course, for New Year's resolutions is that whole, I'm going to lose weight, go to the gym, quit smoking. Those are kind of the most popular New Year's resolutions. And what I think is so interesting about them is that they are truly lifestyle changes that are so much deeper than a series of actions. And this is kind of jumping ahead to what we're going to be talking about today. And so when we set goals like, I'm going to go to the gym every day on January 1st and following, if you haven't been to the gym in the last 3 years, it's a big leap. And sometimes we set our goals up in such a way that they're just not sustainable. They're so far from what we're currently doing. And that is, in a sense, why they become the New Year's resolution. It's like, wow, there's a new year coming up. That's a big deal. I'm going to set up a goal and I'm going to have that momentum behind me. That's what's going to keep me moving forward. But when the day passes and when you go 1 day, 2 days, 3 days without taking any positive action or achieving the progress that you hoped that you would achieve, it becomes really easy to let go of those goals and not achieve what it is that we're looking for. So maybe you can relate to some examples. I mean, maybe it is a lifestyle, a health related goal that you have for yourself. If that's your goal, then I invite you to think about how what we talk about today applies to that particular goal. It may be job transitions. How many times do I talk to lawyers who have been in the same role for years, where every year they're questioning, should I be here? Should I not be here? They come to me, they talk to me, they kind of go off, and maybe they come back to work with me. Sometimes they don't. And the question is it changing for you? Are you making that change, even though year after year you tell yourself you want to, and yet you don't actually make that change? Sometimes it's a revenue goal. Maybe you're trying to reach a certain billing target. Maybe you're trying to generate new clients. Maybe you're trying to work with a particular client. And maybe it's something that's a little bit more general. Maybe you just want to have a fabulous life where you have more vacations, you have more time with your friends. And yet then when it comes to implementing, you come up against some hurdles. So the reason that I'm talking about this today, the problem that I see is that we set goals, but we know that we're not going to keep them. And yes, the new year is a clean slate. It can be an incentive, but sometimes what it leads to is an almost graspy attempt to set a goal that is designed to tame an underlying problem or we set ourselves up with some sort of a dramatic overhaul that we're just not equipped to deal with. And so what I'm hoping to provide you with today are some ideas and some strategies to help you figure out how you can achieve your goals, but not through setting an unrealistic New Year's resolution that you're going to have a really hard time sticking to. So I've alluded to this already, but the reason why I think we fall into the trap of setting these unrealistic New Year's resolutions is that we get kind of hooked on the idea or the fantasy of the goal because we get wrapped up in the season, because we get wrapped up in the prospect of this new year. And in that state, we set the goal for ourselves without really taking stock of how it is that we got to where we are. So, for example, some of the ways this comes up in my practice is I speak with lawyers who do not feel satisfied in their job, and they know they want to leave it, but they don't know how. And what they will sometimes describe to me is that they feel trapped. They feel like they don't have options, either inside of law or outside of law. They feel like they need to play it safe. And so they continue to show up in a role that they do not like. And maybe you can relate to this. And if you can relate, then you may think that the solution is to find a different job or to find a different career, because you think that when you get there, you'll feel happier, you'll feel liberated, you'll feel more fulfilled, and you'll feel less stressed. But the reason that you have reached the point where you are at is because you have been reinforcing your beliefs of feeling trapped, of not having options, of needing to play it safe. And what that has meant is that along the way, you've made micro decisions that have over time reinforced those beliefs and created a situation where you do feel trapped. So as a result, what you think and how you feel has actually created what you see and what you experience. So you can see how if you go from that position to trying to transport yourself into a new job, if you don't work on some of those internal beliefs and habits, there's a good chance that you're going to carry some of that at least with you to your new job. Another example that you may be able to relate to is time and practice management. And a lot of clients that I work with struggle with procrastinating on work tasks that you don't want to do. Sometimes it's timesheets. Sometimes it's those big projects where it feels overwhelming to start. Sometimes it's difficult conversations that you just don't want to have. And what can happen there is that you develop this internal belief about who you are as a person. You start to identify yourself as a person who always leaves things to the last minute. I'm guilty of that. I just told you about my Christmas strategy. Leave everything to the last minute. That's who I am. I'm not looking to change that. But you may be looking to change something in your practice where you've identified yourself as being a certain way. Sometimes you identify yourself as a perfectionist, and that can contribute to your procrastination. You see yourself as somebody who gets so worried about delivering a perfect product that you don't deliver anything at all. And again, those beliefs reinforce procrastination. So if you go from, and let's use the example of the gym, somebody who is going to go to the gym every single day and get into the best shape of their life starting January 1st, and you haven't been in the gym for the last 3 years, there's going to be a disconnect between your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your internal self-concept, and the actions that are required of you to achieve the goal that you want. And what we're going to focus on today is how we can align those two so that the actions flow more easily. Some of the things that you may be trying to do currently, you may set lofty goals that are unrealistic. So again, I've done this. I did that this year. There was a goal that I created in my practice, and I created that goal in a sense of fantasy, right? And I'll tell you what that goal is. I wanted to have my membership live by January 1st of this year. And I have a vision of what I want to create. And I'm not giving up on that vision. But the container in which I wanted to deliver it was unrealistic for January, given what else I had on my plate and what else I have chosen to put on my plate. And so what that requires of me is to now examine my goal and to examine my internal beliefs about what it means for me to create this membership and to align those two things. So for you, there may be a goal that you have set for yourself. Maybe it's a goal that you had during this calendar year and now you're going to set it as a resolution. And there might be something really incredible that you're really excited about, but you're just not ready yet for that goal. So that may be one way that you set yourself up for failure. You set your goal too big and it doesn't give you enough time or capacity to bring it to fruition. Another challenge that you might have when it comes to setting goals, another way that you might try to cope that's not actually solving the problem, is looking for formulas or signing up for classes or looking at other people's strategies. In other words, you're looking for a recipe to succeed based on something outside of yourself. And that may not actually be the best formula or recipe for you. How this might show up, if you procrastinate, you might think that if you just get out there and buy the right day timer, that's going to solve your problems. And I can tell you, based on the work that I do with clients, it's not the day timer that's going to solve for your practice management questions and challenges. It goes much deeper than that. It's not necessarily harder when it comes to changes, when you can actually make those changes at a very deep level. The actions then flow more easily. But it takes work to see internally what it is that you're thinking and feeling and doing, what it is that is causing you to engage in that repeat behavior, and then solve for that internal problem. So looking to somebody else for how they did it isn't necessarily going to help you because you may not be able to implement until you do that internal work first. A third way that you might be trying to cope is relying on willpower and hustle to force yourself to achieve your goal. Now, this is a strategy that is very familiar to me, and it's very familiar to a number of the lawyers that I work with. Chances are you have relied on your ability to work hard and to hustle to get things done, to get good grades, to make your clients feel happy, to get them good results, to help your colleagues, to advance professionally. And so when you set a big goal and then you rely on willpower and hustle to get there, you may be able to get yourself to that point where you achieve the goal. But again, if you haven't done that internal work, you may be hustling and willpowering yourself really, really hard, going against something that is quite ingrained in you. And I'll give some examples in a few minutes. And so it's harder than it needs to be. And when you're in that state and you're in that state for a prolonged period of time, that's when you can start really feeling the impact of burning out and not being able to sustain the level of success that you're achieving through your willpower and hustle. So why don't these strategies work? Well, if you're setting these goals that are unrealistic and they're too big and the timelines are too short, you're invariably going to fall short on your goals, and you may feel ashamed, you may feel hopeless, you may feel defeated, and you may ask yourself why you even bother setting goals in the first place. And I know people who are allergic to setting goals, whether they're New Year's resolutions, whether they're goals in their practice. And I suspect part of that is because of their own internal track record with achieving them. If you knew that you would achieve the goals that you set for yourself, it's very likely that you'd feel a lot more comfortable and confident in setting them. When you follow somebody else's advice and it doesn't work, you may find that you blame yourself and you give up. Instead of trying a solution that is more compatible with your strengths, your interests, ideas that you may come up with by yourself, you look at that system and say, well, okay, I tried to do this system. It didn't work for me. This obviously isn't in the cards for me. And so you might find you're giving up too soon. Going to the example of willpower, it's finite, right? Once you burn through your willpower, then you're back to where you started. And there have been studies on decision making and our capacity as humans to make decisions. And there's a finite number. I don't know what that exact number is, but there's a finite number of decisions you can make in any given day. And so if you are using up your internal resources to exercise your willpower and it's hard and you don't want to do it, you're going to end up burning through that energy. And at a point, there's going to be a limit. It's not going to work for you anymore. So until you fix the internal programming, you will be burning more energy because you need to work harder to overcome your own internal resistance. So let's go back to the example of someone who wants to leave their job. And one of the reasons why they're staying is because they think that they are playing it safe. they might think that if they leave their job, that is dangerous. If they look at other options, that is dangerous. That is not playing it safe. And so they may go out and do the work of exploring opportunities, of informational interviews, whatever that looks like for them. But they're going to be doing that with that internal struggle, that internal battle of, okay, I'm exploring these options, but this isn't safe. So that's what I mean by that extra layer of struggle that you can experience if you haven't aligned your insides with your outsides. What you end up creating is, and this is something that I hear a lot from lawyers who reach out to me, is that thought loop, right? You're on a repeat cycle. You feel internal conflict over what it is that you want to accomplish. You may get closer to your goals, but you're not close enough. You may stay on track for a certain amount of time and then you fall off. And once you've fallen off, you let things go entirely. Or you may stay stuck where you are with your current job, on your current schedule, fighting the battle over and over again without making any real progress. So where this comes into play when it comes to New Year's resolutions is that it is really an opportunity to set goals that will inspire you, goals that will move you forward. And it's also an opportunity to set goals that are going to disappoint, goals where you're going to feel like you're falling short. And then there's that internal battle that can follow. And so what I recommend this year, when you go about thinking about the goals that you want to set for yourself in the new year, is to take a different approach. And I'm going to visit a concept called the be, do, have model. I've actually talked about it a bit in an earlier podcast episode called Do Less, Be More. It's episode number 55. So there is some overlap in the discussion. The reason that I'm revisiting it today is that I think New Year's resolutions are such an opportunity for us to reinvent the way that we are, the way that we do things to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. So what I mean by that is, let's say you want to have a practice that is beautifully managed by you. You want to have control. You no longer want to be scrambling. You want to step out of that reactive zone. You want to feel confident with the decisions that you're making. There's a difference. If you're not experiencing that right now, there's a difference between where you are now and the person you need to become to have that practice. And if you focus exclusively on the action items, the bullet points, the tasks that you'll need to execute to get to where you want to be, then if you don't execute on those tasks, then again, you're going to end up in that position that we talked about earlier, where you write it off, you write yourself off, and then you don't move any further. And so what I'm going to invite you to think about is, okay, what if I set that goal for myself? What if I decide that by the end of the year, I want X, right? Whether it is that new job or that beautifully managed practice, or I want to feel confident. I want those boundaries in place. Then instead of looking at the actions that you're going to be taking to get there, we're going to start first with who you need to become, who you need to be. So there's 3 steps to this process. And the first one is be. Again, this goes back to the be, do, have model. So the traditional model is that we think we need to do the things so that we can have the result, and then we get to be the person that has that result. And instead of that, what I'm going to suggest to you is that you need to practice being the person who does the thing, who then has the result. So in this example, we're going to focus first on who you need to become instead of what steps you need to take. So take the example of wanting to get into shape in the new year. And this is something that I have done. I can relate to it. Is I have in the past gone off and said, okay, Paula, this is the year that you're going to get into shape. Let's go up the street. We'll buy a membership at the gym and you'll go to classes 5 days a week and it's going to be great. You're going to be in the best shape of your life. I've done that a number of times. And I can tell you that I have never once stuck to a schedule at a gym, ever. And I used to think it was because I was lazy, because I couldn't keep up an exercise routine. I had all sorts of thoughts about it. But what I've discovered in my middle ages is that actually I don't like gyms. Actually, I don't like sticking to schedules. Actually, I like to exercise really early in the morning before the gyms are often even open. And so what I do instead is I have exercise routines that are easy. I can go for a run. I have an exercise routine I can do at home. I like to be outside. I don't like other people telling me what to do. And so as it turns out, I can actually exercise every single day without any problems. But if I were to try to get myself into a gym, I would continually fall short. So you might ask yourself how this relates to a goal that you have for yourself. You might think that the way for you to succeed in your practice is to deliver presentations just like your neighbor and to go and work with the clients in the style of the partner that you love working with. Or you may think that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, and you have to follow the right path. But if you're attaching yourself to that mechanism, the way that I attach myself to a gym membership, you might be giving yourself a vehicle that isn't going to get you to where you would like to be. Instead, you need to be and think like the person that has what you want, the person who has a blossoming practice, the person who is organized, and then work your way backwards based on what's actually going to work for you. So let's say that you procrastinate sometimes, and instead of then jumping into an action plan, I would invite you to think about who you need to become to better manage your time. I mean, what is it like if you knew that you would be confident that you will get things done? If you were the type of person who was able to ask for the support that you need or give yourself the support you need. Maybe there's an internal dialogue that's going on there where you're berating yourself, you're blaming yourself, you're telling yourself you never get things done on time. Maybe there are things that you're currently doing that you will simply not be doing when you are the person with well-managed time. And what it doesn't necessarily involve is adopting other people's strategies unless they align with a style that's going to work for you. Another example is if you're looking to get a new job. And I see this in clients who reach out to me where you're really struggling. You don't like the job that you're in. You don't really know what's next. You want to play it safe. And then again, going back to that safe example, you have trouble moving out of that safety zone because it goes against your grain, right? And so in that case, what you need to figure out is, can you find ways in which it is safe for you to change? What would be safe about you changing your job? And how is it not safe to stay where you are indefinitely? And those are ways of looking at it from an external perspective, right? Safety and leaving, safety and staying. But what about the safety that you create internally? Can you create a sense of safety within yourself before looking at your job to do it for you? Another challenge that I see among lawyers that I work with is abdicating responsibility. And this is very subtle. If it's something that you're doing, you're probably doing it at an unconscious level. And the trouble with it is that it can be very paralyzing. So as long as you put the power in somebody else's hands, you will experience a subtle sense of helplessness. And this may be why you feel trapped, why you feel like you don't have a choice. And some telltale signs that I know this is something that might be happening is when lawyers come to me and they want me to tell them what to do. And I could tell them, but I won't tell them because that only reinforces the belief that this person doesn't have the power to make their own decisions. And as long as I'm reinforcing that, they aren't learning how to take responsibility for the choices that they make within their professional life. So the work here then becomes learning how to take responsibility for all of it and then learning how to move forward. So you can see these are internal changes that need to happen in order for those external changes to follow more fluidly. And interestingly, and I think this is worth noting, is some clients who come to me who initially think that they want to move out of their job stay. And the reason that they are the most successful clients sometimes that I work with is because they haven't had to make changes. Once they realize what's going on within their practice, once they realize that they have a lot more control than they thought that they had, when they realize they have the agency to cultivate their practice in a direction that aligns with their goals and their interests, they then have that sense of responsibility to create more of what it is that they want in their practice. And so you can see how in that scenario, moving from one job to another wouldn't necessarily solve for the problem, But developing that skill of taking a responsibility and learning how to create the practice that you want, that in itself becomes the learning. That becomes the growth. So again, if you're looking at the external goal to measure success, you may not see that as a success, but that internal shift truly is where the magic has happened. So that is the first step, is to really think about who you need to be in order to have the goal that it is that you think that you want. And maybe in the end, you will want that goal. The second step is the doing. And I think you can play with the having and the doing in terms of the sequencing. For today, I'm going to put it second, the doing, because I think when we create New Year's resolutions, we often start with the actions. And so we've started with the be, who you need to be, and the actions then flow from who you are. And so here we want to align your actions with the concept that you have of yourself as the person who has already achieved the goal. Now, again, if you are looking for a recipe, then this is going to be a struggle for you. I mean, you might start with a recipe, you might look at other people's recipes, but ultimately you're going to need to tailor that recipe to yourself. You can imagine you're cooking and maybe you like curry. I love curry. I can't really tolerate the spice. And so for me, I might take someone else's recipe for a lovely Thai curry or an Indian curry, and I might make the recipe, but leave out some of the spices because I know that that's what's going to work for me. So for you, when it comes to looking at the ways that other people have reached success in their practice, you might borrow elements from their recipe, but ultimately you're going to have to create it in a way that works for you. Now, if you are attached to a recipe, I can usually tell because that's when you come to me and you tell me again that you want to get a different job. And again, as I mentioned before, the issue here is you're looking for me to tell you what to do. And the underlying challenge here is relying on someone to tell you what to do and then being unhappy because it's not what you want. Another challenge that you might have is you might tell me that you want me to help you deal with your crazy practice, right? Things just feel out of control. It feels very reactive. And you want me to give you a formula. You want me to give you a recipe, but the recipe won't stick if you're not able to implement the recipe. If you're not dealing with the part where you set boundaries, or you're not dealing with the part where you need to say no to people. You may also come to me looking for permission to leave your job. You may not ask for it, but you may implicitly be craving that. You might be wanting me to say that. But if I were to give you that permission, it wouldn't really help you because number one, who am I to give you permission? But number two, you don't figure out for yourself how to give yourself permission. So if you're attaching yourself to the recipe without doing that first part of the work, you'll need to go back and figure out who do you need to be the person who has the goal. Now, another challenge that you might have that you need to maybe address before jumping into the action part of it is dealing with the discomfort of disconnecting from your heretofore success strategies that got you to where you are today. In other words, dealing with the pain that comes along with making changes. So, as I mentioned earlier, hustle and hard work are examples that might feel really comfortable to you because you've used these strategies before to create success in your practice. And so if you decide that you're going to create more space in your calendar, maybe you're going to hustle a little bit less, you're not going to rely on that as a way of achieving your goal, then you might be breaking up with a part of yourself. And that can feel really painful. You may literally feel like you're tearing out a part of who you are in order to try a different strategy. And you don't know yet if that new strategy is going to work because you haven't tested it, you haven't tried it. So that in itself can be really challenging. So these are some challenges that you might have when it comes to implementing a strategy that relies on you being first and doing second. Now, when it does come to the doing, I have some ideas on how you can make this happen in a way that is sustainable and that will actually create progress for you. If you've created a big lofty goal, that's fine. You've given yourself a year to create something, and maybe that loftiness is what makes it so exciting. So I don't think you necessarily need to set a goal that is, quote, realistic, unquote. Sometimes lofty, big goals are what motivate us to stretch ourselves, to change the way that we're thinking in order to achieve them. But then you're going to have to work toward those goals. And when it comes to the action steps, I recommend taking small steps. Every small step toward your goal counts. And when you take those small steps and there's even a very tiny success, you start developing that internal reward system, the dopamine hits that will keep you going and keep you moving forward. So take small steps, find ways to make those steps as easy as possible. So for example, if going to the gym or going for a run is the way you're going to achieve fitness in the new year, it's setting up your shoes ahead of time. It's having a predictable routine for yourself. If it is creating a practice that is more organized and sustainable, it's figuring out what systems are going to work for you and looking where you're already strong and then building your systems on your strengths. You don't need to look at your neighbor who has a perfectly manicured office and everything runs perfectly on time and they're always 3 weeks ahead of schedule when it comes to filing deadlines. If you yourself are still at the stage where you're doing things the night before, you've got a few steps to go before you're going to have a practice like that. So don't put that expectation on yourself right away. Allow your changes to be small and consistent. And I guarantee if you keep up with small but consistent steps over time, you will make progress. You want your steps to be as easy as possible. You also want to notice where you feel resistance. So if you start making changes or you're trying to make changes and you find some of them are really difficult to make, that's your body's way of telling you that there is a problem. And so the problem might be that you're out of alignment. The problem might be that this goal is actually not something that you truly are connected to. The problem might also be a skills problem. You don't have the skills yet. And so maybe you need to develop the skills to get there. It may be that there's an ethical problem for you. It may not be aligned with your values. I mean, there's all sorts of different reasons why you might not feel good about something. Sometimes it's just going to be the discomfort of change, right? It's going to be the difficulty of letting go of the hustle, for example, to create more ease, in which case it helps to acknowledge that this is something that is difficult. And you are going to need to mourn the loss of one success strategy in exchange for another. And if you keep this up, then over time, what will happen is you'll start to create new habits. You'll start to develop new neural pathways that reinforce who it is that you have chosen to become. It will take time. It will take practice, and it will take continued course correction toward who it is that you choose to be. So that step 2 is the do. The first is the be, the second is the do, and the third is to have. As you start to create the result that you want, as you start to get closer to your goal, you may find that you start to knock up against a set point, a feeling of comfort, and then a feeling of discomfort. And what you might think about here is a thermostat. If you have a thermostat that is set to a specific degree and the room gets colder than that, then the heater kicks in to warm it up. Or maybe it's air conditioning. If the room gets too warm, the coolants kick in to bring that temperature down. All of us have set points where we feel very comfortable. And if your practice is messy, it may be unpleasant, but it may also be very comfortable. And if you move yourself into a more organized way of being, it may feel foreign, and you may find that you self-sabotage to bring yourself back to that uncomfortable state. If you are leading, you're looking to lead a team, and you're used to being a contributing member of a team, but not a leader, it may feel uncomfortable when you push yourself into that leadership role. And so part of your work then is going to be learning how to have your goal. It's not just becoming that person. It's not just doing the action. It's actually having that goal. And that can be really challenging. If you have ever struggled, for example, I think fitness is such a wonderful example because we're all human. We all live in human bodies, and we've all had, at least as far as I know, various levels of feeling fit, healthy, whatever that looks like. And so you maybe can relate to that. Maybe there have been times where you've just felt off, right? That there's a certain level of health that has not felt right to you. And so you go and you make changes and you feel so much better. But if you haven't aligned your self-concept with that level of fitness, then you might find yourself slipping. So the same may be true in your practice. You may find that you reach maybe you do find that new job or that new role or some place where you just feel like there's a capacity for you to really expand and to feel really good. But instead of stepping into that and allowing yourself to have that, you start recreating some of the old patterns that you had in your old job. And so ultimately you recreate that same framework that you were so unhappy in the first place. Here might be boundaries, for example. So if you find it really challenging right now to keep up because you have not been setting boundaries and you think the solution is to get a new job and you go into that new job, if you don't re-establish boundaries or learn how to establish boundaries, it won't be long before you start inviting those same type of challenges. So the exercise here really is to explore and figure out how to have the success, the goal that you're seeking. And I should mention that all of these, the be, the do, the have, these are all areas where having an external perspective can really help. Having a coach, of course, can really help. Bringing a friend along for the ride can really help. Bringing a group along can really help. When I opened my program in January, this is one of the reasons why I'm so desiring to make this a community project, because when we join forces and we declare our goals that we want to achieve and we talk about some of the challenges that we're having and we have the perspective of others who see us, who can share their opinions, who can reflect back to us what they see, it can be such a transformative experience. And I say this because I am in coaching communities. I'm in a mastermind. I'm in small group programs. I've done one-to-one coaching where I am the person being coached. And there's so much power in those conversations. And so if you struggle with something, a goal that you're trying to reach, and you keep coming back to it, by all means, reach out to me, reach out to another coach, have the support that you need to make the progress that you really want. So the reason why this approach is going to work for you is that it allows you to step away from that fantasy knee-jerk reaction that can be created in that New Year's resolution frenzy. And instead of setting yourself up with wild, unrealistic expectations of what you can achieve on a timeline that isn't realistic, you create a framework for success that's not hinged on necessarily achieving that goal in a particular way. The exercise here is becoming the person who has achieved the goal. And that feels good. And when something feels good, you want to do more of it. The skills that you're going to need, number one, is honesty. Going back to that idea of reflecting back on where you are and what might be holding you back, is when you're honest with yourself, then you can take steps toward resolving the challenges that are keeping you where you are. So if you look at, for example, a situation where you do want to change the work that you're doing, but the reality is that you're scared and you don't know if you're going to find something that you like, and what you really want is for someone else to tell you what to do. When you admit that to yourself, then it's a release, right? Now you can actually look at these truths for you and uncover what may not be true about them, uncover what thoughts you might be having, what beliefs, what internal beliefs or frameworks you might be imposing on yourself. And then you can figure out ways to unhinge them, right? If you're feeling trapped, you can figure out how to untrap yourself. Another skill that will be required is patience. This is not overnight success. I have yet to see anybody who has achieved true overnight success. Literally, that they went to bed one day unsuccessful and woke up the next day successful. There are absolutely ways that your success can grow and thrive and sometimes reach an exponential level of success, but it isn't built on nothing. It's built on the work that you do to get there. It's becoming that person who is capable of having that success. And so patience is part of that, learning how to grow as a person along with the goals that you're achieving. This also requires that you develop self-trust. And for many lawyers, self-trust is one of those pieces that can get undermined. I have a wonderful podcast recording from last week with Melanie Goella and Ellen Schlesinger, where they talk about their practice, their counseling, coaching practice that they have with lawyers from anxiety to ease. And one of the core principles that they teach is self-trust, because what they have found in their practice is that a lot of lawyers have really experienced an undermining of the trust that they have within themselves. And so this is crucial when it comes to goal setting. Instead of setting up these goals that are so big and lofty and clunky and overwhelming that you don't take any action on them and you don't reach them and you feel terrible about yourself, that doesn't help you build a sense of trust with yourself, versus giving yourself a goal, but then allowing your success to be measured by you taking those small steps and successfully building on those small steps. That's where you build that trust. That's where that sense of self-trust gets established, one step at a time. So that is another skill that you will be required to develop. And then finally, you need a willingness to play the game and to keep playing. Not just for the first 2 weeks in January. You need to be willing to play this game for the long run. You can only really fail at a goal when you give up trying to reach it. And so if you make the decision that you're not going to give up on your goal, you're not going to give up on becoming the person that you want to be, the person who is capable of having that goal, you'll never fail. But it requires your willingness to keep going. And what will happen there is when you can adopt this as a practice that you embody, that you develop to help you achieve and attain the goals that you set for yourself, you will be able to create sustainable success. You will be able to step away from that hustle and willpower and white knuckling, trying to force yourself to achieve these goals that you set on these timeframes that you set for yourself. And instead, what you'll experience is an evolution of yourself as a professional, of the way that you practice. And what you'll experience is more elegance. Elegance, I love that word. To me, it is simple and effective. You will find ways that are simple and effective to get closer to where you want to be. And you'll feel a greater sense of ease because you're no longer having that internal battle. So this has been a longer episode than I had intended. I very much hope that what we spoke about today resonates with you and that it helps you. I am not suggesting that you should not set yourself up with some goals for the new year if that's what you want to do. I know I will be setting goals for myself, and I would encourage you and invite you to think about how you want to achieve those goals, how you want to be in relation to those goals before you start doing, and to prepare yourself to have the goals once you do the work to achieve them. So my beautiful, dear, wonderful friend, Merry Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. There will be another episode before the new year, so stay tuned for that as well. And for all of you, I just wanted to extend a very warm thank you for listening to this podcast, for joining me each week. It means everything to me. And again, if you are interested in joining me in January, please do reach out, send me an email, follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, whatever works best for you. I would love the privilege and the honor of helping you reach your goals in your practice. And so please do let me know if that's something that you would be interested in learning more about. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and look forward to reconnecting with you again next week. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.